Yo, peace. Indra back in the building. Yo, let me get some nines in the chat box if you can hear me and see me fine. Let me get some nines in the chat box if you can hear me and see me fine. In the interim, just want to make sure that if you want some free daily spiritual wisdom and you want to hear from me every morning about 9 o'clock, make sure to go to indraemail.com. You'll see it scrolling at the bottom. That is my only thing I guaranteed, the only way to hear from me on a daily. So for the past few months, been sending out emails every 9 o'clock in the morning. So if you want some spiritual wisdom, you feel like you're not on track, or you feel like you need someone in your corner, I'm there for you. Go to indraemail.com. All right. So y'all know what it is. Y'all see the topic at hand. I appreciate all the confirmations. Let me know I can be heard. Shout out to my moderator in the building, Shanika. Make sure to drop your contact info and connect with her. She's an aspiring spiritual entrepreneur. So you're going to be hearing from her as far as the workings that she's doing. She's in the accelerator program. I work with her closely. So if I work with you closely and know your energy, I can definitely vouch for you. She's a true spiritual being, but still down to earth. So definitely connect with her. Yo, too. Hey man, make sure y'all connect with me on my social media. I've been on the social media hard body, especially Instagram and Twitter. I've been on there every day posting some content. So let me see if I got a banner for that. Make sure to connect with me there. And those are my social media at the bottom. All for free. You know what I'm saying? So if you want free content, make sure to connect with me. So y'all see the topic at hand, man. Apparently Joe Rogan, who is a popular podcaster, says some things. You feel what I'm saying? He says some things that can be taken a certain way. Let's keep it a buck. Like you look a certain way and you're talking about something that affects somebody that doesn't look like you. So automatically, people are going to be up in arms, like what's going on. You feel me? So I felt like usually on Monday, I like to do something a little bit more motivational, give you that shot in the arm to get you through your week. But with this coming across my desk, I just found out about it this AM, to keep it tall. When it came across my desk, I was like, let me go ahead and speak about this. For one, I don't believe I spoke exclusively about race, in particular the N word. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like that would be for something, something new that I can speak about. And for two, I'm totally not triggered. I can care less about what people say. I'm just gonna keep that's one clue about how I feel. I can care less about what people say, especially people that don't look like me. And I make a statement, cover your ears, get the babies out the room or whatever. If I didn't come out your vagina or go in your vagina, I really don't care what you have to say. You feel me? I didn't come out your vagina and I'm not going in your vagina. So what you say really has nothing to do with me. So that gives you a little clue about my perspective on it. But I do want to take my time and just give you some context as far as how I formulated my viewpoint, and also I want to give you a different way of looking at stuff like this when it comes about, because this is a repeating thing. You know what I mean? Like this isn't nothing new. You feel me? I know the last time this kind of happened was with John Gruden, who was the Las Vegas football coach. He said some things in an email 10 years or so many years ago, and then it came to the surface and he got canceled. And we're living in a cancel culture where if you say anything or do anything that people don't mesh well with, they're going to get you out of here. I guess the term a Karen, you feel me? Like a Karen is someone who takes somebody and be like, hey, we got to get rid of that person. There's a lot of Karens going on nowadays. You feel me? So I feel like this is a very good topic as far as that. So, give you a little bit of a background. I'm in my mid 40s. So, I was born in the 70s in the year of the dragon in Chinese astrology, the year of the fire dragon. And I grew up in the 80s. Like I don't remember the 70s, but I definitely remember growing up in the 80s. And I grew up in a predominantly melanated area, 14th in Baltimore, Middletown, Ohio. The city I still live in right now is roughly about 45,000 people. So this is a small city in comparison to Cincinnati and Dayton, which I live directly in the middle of. Cincinnati, shout out to the Bengals. literally 30 minutes south. Dayton is literally 30 minutes north. Shout out to Pickett, Jay Webb. He's in the chat. Good brother. He lives in Dayton or whatever, so he know what it is. So the city I live in is relatively small in comparison to the major cities in Ohio. So growing up, like I said, I grew up in 14th and Baltimore. That's the neighborhood. I don't care what city you grew up in or where you live. The neighborhood is like any other hood. You feel me? Like you got crime, you got drugs, you got robberies, you have gangs, you have all these different elements that are pretty much prevalent in every so-called melanated area that is, I would say, lower income. Low income melanated areas usually have the same elements involved. Like y'all know what it is. And let me say this too. I know that most of my audience is melanated. I may have some non-melanated people watching it. This ain't for you. You feel me? I'm speaking directly to people who look dead on me, whether you're light-skinned or darkest of hue, whether you look like this, you feel me, or you look like a manila folder. I'm not one of those people who be like, oh, you're light-skinned, so you're not black, or you're black, so you're super black. That don't mean nothing to me. If you have melanin, I'm speaking to you. You feel me? So I want to be very clear who I'm speaking to in this video. Usually my videos are universal and can apply to everyone. This one I'm speaking directly to my brothers and sisters. All right. So I grew up in a neighborhood where everyone looked like me. So the school I went to, everyone looked like me. And I literally, I mean, it might have been one or two Europeans at my elementary, but I don't remember. I remember it being black everything. You feel me? So I shout out to McKinley. That's the high school, or that's the school I went to. So the school I went to, all melanated, at least 99% melanated. The church I had to go to, I was subjected to go to, all melanated. My household, obviously, all melanated. As far as I know, we didn't have any mixed people or any Europeans in my family. So everyone in my family looked dead on me. The school, like I said, all melanated. So I grew up with my grandparents, peace and blessing be upon them. My mom stayed there as well. But when I went to sixth grade was the first time that I remember, as far as I remember, staying with my mother and going to a school directly in that district where we live at. Back in the day, you had to go to whatever school was in your district. So when I went to stay with my mother on Titus Avenue, this was a predominantly European area. So imagine me as a child going from an all melanated school and then going to a school where, truth be told, in my sixth grade class, there was one other melanated person in that school that I remember. One other melanated person in the school I went to in sixth grade. And the melanated person, her mom was a teacher there. Only black teacher. We were the only two black students or whatever. And I'm using black, melanated, and all these terms. Don't put too much energy into it. Just articulating the point. Black, Negro, melanated, it's all, it doesn't matter. So imagine I'm a child. I'm in this school with people that don't look like me. So I'm already having some sort of trepidations about going there up until that time. And you know what I mean? This shows the ignorance when you grow up in a certain environment. Up until that time, I thought all white people were rich. You know what I'm saying? Because when I went across the railroad tracks into the areas by the hospital and to the areas by the school, I'm seeing houses that were big, and it seemed like, and then I watched TV and it shows Europeans in a grandiose way where they look like they're winning and they're doing everything, quote unquote, above par. So as a child coming from the hood, you go into an all-white school, like you really start to see the contrast. Like this is the first time I was with kids that grew up in those big houses. Like my school in sixth grade, it was literally in the neighborhood where people have big boy cribs. You feel me? And I was getting bussed out there, even though we lived in a predominantly white neighborhood. It wasn't no high income neighborhood. So I'm coming from, I don't want to say impoverished environments, but I definitely wasn't on their income level, so to speak. So I went to that sixth grade high school. Roosevelt Elementary is no longer up. They tore it down. That's what happens when you get old. They start tearing down all the old stuff. You feel me? So they tore down my sixth grade school. But looking back, I can honestly say that I didn't experience any so-called racism. What I experienced was racial sensitivity or insensitivity. And what I mean by that is I remember hearing my first black joke when I went there in sixth grade. I literally remember, like, for one thing, my best friend at that school was the biggest and baddest white dude at the school. That was my best friend in sixth grade. So we were cool, you know what I'm saying? And like I said, I didn't have any problems with any of the kids there. But what I do remember is hearing black jokes. And I remember the first time I heard it, it was me, my best friend, and a couple other white dudes. And I remember they said, "Hey, you want to hear a joke? There was a black guy, white guy, and an Asian guy." Y'all feel me? If you're old enough, you remember those kind of jokes. And that's the way it was. And I remember looking at the kid, and I'm telling you, I remember vividly looking at the kid telling the joke, and he didn't think he was doing anything wrong. He literally looked like he was just talking to all white people. That was the only thing that I remember from going to an all white school in elementary. Now, fast forward, I went back to in my middle school was mixed. I went to Vale Middle School, which is a mixed middle school. And then I went to high school in Middletown because we still lived in Middletown. Middletown is a very kind of a mixed area. It's definitely a lot more Europeans than melanated, but at the high school in Middletown, it's mixed. So you're not going to, every class, you're going to have somebody else that looks like you. So I was familiar. There was racial tension because from what I can tell, whenever you get a big group of people and they don't look like each other, you're going to have some sort of tension. Did I have any problems there? No, not that I can recall, but I'd be lying to you if I didn't say it was some racial weirdoism, is the best way I can say it. But the turning point was when I went from Middletown High School to Monroe. In my ninth grade year, my mother, she went out to, and shout out to my mom, Dukes, for sure, for sure. Strong melanated woman. When you say strong black woman, that's my mom. You feel me? Was on the system at one point, got off the system. Like I literally seen her, work and build up things or whatever, to the point now where she owns her own crib. And when she transitions, she's going to leave a house to myself and my sister or whatever. So I definitely want to shout out my mom for being a strong woman in my life. So when we went from hold on. So when I went from Middletown High School and moved to Monroe in ninth grade, and the reason I had to move there is because my mom wanted to live closer to her job, but she was still sensitive enough to me saying like, "Hey, yo, I'm about to move here." She already know the views of Monroe from people like me, that it was a corny school, it wasn't cool, mostly white school, like predominantly white, that one way, but it was just not considered cool. If you grew up where I grew up, you looked down on Monroe. So I'm thinking this as I'm leaving, and my mom's told me after football is when I had to go to the school. We already moved to Monroe, but we weren't living, or I didn't have to go to school there until after football. So I'm trying to give y'all a backstory of how I have my views on race the way I do. So after football in ninth grade, I had to go to Monroe. So when I went there, it was a culture shock. I'm not going to hold you. Walking into this school with people that didn't look like me, I want to say, shoot, this is probably 90% white. People didn't look like me, and more importantly, I didn't know them. Where the other melanated people, they knew each other. You feel me? I went to a school with melanated people that I didn't know and a bunch of white people that I didn't know. So it was my first time going into a situation. I'm 14 at the time. My first time going into a situation where I'm totally feeling like a stranger. I remember my first time at the lunchroom. Y'all know the infamous lunch story when you go to a new school and you have to find out where you're going to eat lunch. I remember walking in there and just looking around, like not knowing anybody, but just automatically going to a table that had people that looked like me, which was one table, not even a whole table. It was like a square on the table was our lunch table or whatever. So that kind of tell you the environment that I was in. And I can honestly say beyond a shadow of a doubt This is the first time that I had to get into fight with people that didn't look like me, and it was probably because of the way I'm look. And I'm not saying every European there I have problems with, but there was a handful of white boys I had to put hands on. You feel me? I'm not going to get into those stories, but it was definitely some bloody, um, locker bending fights that I had to get into. One in particular was, I'll tell you this real quick. He was a 300 pounder, big, what you call it, cornbread white dude or whatever. And we were in gym, and for some reason, he always, I'm not going to say bully because that's strong, but he always picked at me. He always has something slick to say. And I'm new at this school. This is literally at my first couple months at the school. So I'm like, man, I don't want to get in trouble. I don't know what to do. And I ain't going to hold you. This dude was huge, yo. This dude was huge. You feel what I'm saying? So he's just sitting there picking on me. But it was one turning point in particular. I'll never forget this. I'm walking down the hallway and he's walking behind me and he's like, hey, he said, why don't you take your, why don't you take your black butt to Middletown or something like that? I came unglued. I turned around, grabbed him, threw him into the, threw him at the locker. And to this day, or when I went back to the school years later, that dent was still in the locker from where I put him on the locker. Then I got on top of him. Teachers came, grabbed us, pulled us apart, and I had to go to the office or whatever. When I get to the office, true story, the principal at the time told me, he looked me in the eye. He is like, Andy, the dude's name was Andy. He was like, Andy admitted that he started the fight. You're free to go. I'm like, what? Like, I'm literally going to the principal's office and he's saying to me, hey, yo, the other dude admitted that he started the fight. You're free to go. Fast forward, and this is just my postulation. I don't know this to be true. I believe that the principal knew that this person, Andy, the one I got in a fight with, started the fight and probably had some sort of things dealing with me being new. I don't believe he admitted to it. I believe the principal made a pimp's call and was like, hey, yo, I don't think dude had anything to do with it. He seemed like a good kid. He ain't got no bad records. I ain't had no bad reputation. But what it was in that gym class, the high school football coach at Monroe came and pulled me out of that class. And he singled me out. He said, yo, I heard that you came over here. I heard you're a good football player in Middletown. Totally want you to come play for us. He was basically recruiting me to go play for the team, which I wasn't going to because I didn't want to go play for them. And I think Andy got kind of jealous because he wanted to play football and he wasn't that decent. And I just think he felt a certain way. Honestly, do I think it was racial? Probably not. I just think dude was salty because I was there and seemingly I was a decent football player. So there were some other incidents that were racially charged, I know for sure. And I don't want to get into that because that's not my point. My point was I went to an environment where people knew each other, people were familiar with each other, and that's just the way it was. It's like the people that aren't used to somebody or being around somebody, they usually have some sort of prejudices. Take any person that didn't grow up around somebody, they're going to assume certain things. A prime example of this is if you grow up in a small town with all white people, and then you go to the University of Cincinnati or something, and you start seeing melanated people, only perspective you have are what you've seen on TV and what your parents have told you. That's the only perspective you have. And as a melanated person, we know we don't get a quote unquote fair shake as far as media. We're painted in a certain light when it deals with the media and the way they express the way we deal with things. So giving you the backdrop, I'm sharing with you that I've been exposed to all melanated, I've been exposed to all white, and I've been exposed to a mix of things. So me personally, I've had friends of all backgrounds. It sounds like the old prejudice where I got a black friend or I got a white friend, but it's true. I've had friends of all different backgrounds, all different ethnicities, and I didn't grow up in a household where race was talked about as far as a negative way. I didn't grow up in that type of household. So everything that I perceive is my own opinion and my own perspective. You feel me? So I had to share that backdrop, and it's probably kind of long, but I wanted to share that because it's going to give credence to what I'm going to say. So with race, as far as I can tell, there's three main types of race, or racism, if you want to call it like that. There's racial biasness, there's racial insensitivity, and there's blanket racism. Racial bias, racial insensitivity, and complete and other racism. I'm going to start with the latter because the latter is probably more hard to detect, even though we see the ramifications of it. Racism is very quiet. Racism is very quiet. Let me give you an example. Racism is a group of people or an organization or a person who intentionally make sure that a certain race never is afforded an opportunity, or they make it dumb difficult for the barrier of entry for that particular race to get down. A prime example of this is a bank. There's certain parameters placed in banks where they're not going to give certain people a loan, or they're going to give a person a loan but put a rate that's dumb high, where if I go get a bank loan, my interest rate might be 15%, but yet my credit score is the same, my employment's the same, everything is the same than my counterpart, but yet I'm going to be hyped with an interest rate that is increasingly in imbalance. Like, it's dumb high and the other person is dumb low. That is racism. Or a person has a crib, like we say a person has like 5 houses. They get with their managers and they be like, hey, yo, if anybody come that's not white, you don't let them in. That's racism. Intentionally putting a race at a circumstance where they're beneath you and you don't afford them an opportunity. You look back in this on this land, racism has been prevalent. It hasn't been too long since slavery was abolished. It hasn't. It's not that long. Peace and blessing be upon him. I remember my grandfather speaking about white dudes, and not, once again, not in a sense where it's like you should hate all white people. He just telling me a story. He was born in 1909, and he experienced and he remembers the black only. He remembers having to do certain jobs. Like, I lived with my grandfather. It wasn't that long ago. So the ramifications or the effect of the real true racism on this planet, where if you looked a certain way, you weren't considered a man. If you looked a certain way, you weren't considered a person. If you looked a certain way, you were subjected to be forced into free labor called slavery. This isn't my opinion. This isn't rhetoric. This is true history on this land. And I can only speak of this land because I'm from the US and live in the US, and most people watching are from the US. So we're not too far away from institutionalized racism. So the same companies that were afforded luxuries of free labor still exist to this day. Think about all your popular companies. I'm not going to say their names, but just think about all the popular companies. When you look into their history, they were involved in free labor called slavery. I have a good friend, older European cat. He's a doctor, a veterinarian, whatever. And I consider him a friend. And the way I try to describe it to him, because he's a person, once you get to a certain age and you reflect back, you be like, man, what didn't I live or what did I miss? And I can tell by my friend that he just want to understand melanated people better. Yeah, you can just tell that's what he's on. So I told him in one conversation we had, I said, imagine if, me being a business owner, that for 20 years, I had people working for me for free. Would I have an advantage over my competition? Would I have an advantage as a business if I'm paying someone very little, next to nothing? Do that give me a clear advantage? Common sense, because this isn't spiritual. This isn't me being, oh, I'm melanated, I got to feel this. It's common sense. If you have free labor, you're going to have an advantage, you know? And that's one of the things that I noticed with a lot of Europeans. They don't want to admit to the fair advantage. That's why it's a term called white guilt or white privilege. Those are residuals from free labor. You are privileged. You have opportunities, or you had opportunities that weren't afforded to people of melanation, to the point where the people that were melanated that lived here, you came and took their land and pushed them back. If I came into your crib right now and told you you have to get out or go in the attic and I'm going to take over the crib, what do you call that? I'm not going to call it a colonizing. I'm not going to call it pilgrim. I'm going to call it what it is. That's death. I'm stealing from you. And one of the problems in America is not we, but certain people want things just swept under the rug. And it doesn't work that way, because we're still dealing with the disproportionate opportunities that certain people were afforded that looked a certain way. This is common sense. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. That's why I respect Europeans that are very honest about that. They're honest. Michael Rappaport is one. Where it's certain people, George Carlin, peace and blessings be upon him. It's certain people that Joe Rogan, to a certain extent, that have put their whiteness in perspective. You feel me? That have told the truth about the history, his story dealing with the land of America. You feel me? And like I said, true racism is silent. So we don't talk about that. And when you don't make right about something, it's going to fester up in all kinds of areas. I was an adult before I realized that melanated people had a true history. I'm a somewhat intelligent man. And it wasn't until I was in my adult years that I knew that my history of people that look like me preceded slavery. That is a problem when that rhetoric and that jargon is still taught in schools today, where it's not history should be taught inclusive. We shouldn't have Black history. We shouldn't have European history. We should just have history. And it should be told the way it went down. Melanated people did an abundance of things on this planet. From what I can tell, when I do critical research, everything was Black before it got light. Everything that's created that we're still using, there were melanated people or cultures that invented it, adopted it, or put it to the forefront. If you haven't studied history, you don't know what I'm talking about. So if this history was taught correctly, then in my opinion, we wouldn't have one people thinking they're inferior and one people thinking they're superior. So my first thing to let you know is true racism is silent. That's why when the KKK was formed and they get together, they put a mask on, because they don't want you knowing that the KKK member might be the manager at a restaurant, or maybe on the police department, or maybe a politician. You feel me? Or maybe a lawyer or an attorney or a judge, because racism is silent. People that are truly racist, they don't go around saying, I hate Black people, or I hate white people, or I hate this. The people that do that usually want to do it for shock value. But true racism to the point where you're intentionally putting a group of people down and making them in a subservient role and making one race appear superior, is silent. True racism is hush hush. All right. That's the first thing that you need to know. So hopefully y'all with me so far. This is flowing kind of well. Hopefully y'all get it. If you have a certain mindset, if you have your mind already set up, then what I'm speaking is bull crap, and that's fine. I'm not here for your validation. I'm here to give my opinion from a spiritual and, in my opinion, intellectual perspective. Because to be honest, this is common sense. I really shouldn't have to make this video. You're allowing people to get you triggered that are doing it on purpose. Like, I study how this thing works. When they want to piss you off, and when I'm speaking to you, I'm talking about melanated people. When they want to piss you off, they know what to put out in the news. They know for sure. This police beating. This person said the N-word. You feel me? They know what news to put out. And what do? repeat and retweet. Oh, he was jogging and he got murdered. Let me retweet that. Like that's going to solve anything. The people, when you're a sick person, a sick individual, or sick people, you have sick thoughts and you do sick things. In no way, shape, or form should we celebrate killing and repost it and retweet it. But as always, do you, if that's the way you feel like you're helping your people by retweeting and repeating things that's happened. If you feel like you're helping your people, by all means, do you. To me, that sounds asinine, but I digress. So we know what racism is. Now, racial biasness, let me talk about that. Racial biasness is like this. I'm a cop, or a cop pulls over a black guy. Okay. The cop pulls over the black guy and he assumes that the black guy might be holding something or maybe dealing with something because that's what he thinks. So when he pulls over that brother, he automatically thinks that certain things are going down. He's not quote unquote racist per se, but because he been taught in this racist system called the police, where they tell the police to target certain individuals that look a certain way, because he's part of that system, he do things that he was taught, but he don't have a connection with the person. And that's the key, because that same scenario, he pulls over a white dude. And when he pulls over that white dude, even though the white dude could be doing the same thing that the brother's doing, because that white dude looks like him, and more importantly, looks like one of his nephews might look, or maybe he has a son look like that, he's automatically going to be biased. He's automatically going to assume, okay, this person is going through a bad time in their life, but guess what? They're going to make it through. Where the black person is going through a bad time in his life, but because he don't have any black friends, because he didn't grow up in a black environment, because everything he's been told about black is negative, he automatically assumed that this black guy is doomed. That's what racial biasness is. Racial bias is when you're biased towards your particular race. For instance, melanated, we have racial biasness. And I'm saying we collectively. You hear a white person say the N-word and you're automatically triggered. How can they do that? I'm Saudi. Hey, they shouldn't be able to do that. They're racist. But a melanated person can say the N-word, and because you are connected with them and you feel a certain way, you're going to give them a pass. Even if you don't like that word so much, you're automatically going to give them a pass. Why? Because you're biased. It's called confirmation bias or racial bias. You're biased towards whatever you're familiar with. So when I'm around a group of black people, if I hear in this, in that, it's like regular. That's the way I grew up. But soon when I hear somebody non-white say it, I'm automatically like, okay, what context did they say it? Who were they talking to? Were they repeating something in a movie? Were they repeating a song? Is that their view? I'm automatically going to assume certain things, but let you know how much we move the goalposts. And once again, I'm talking about melanated people. There's a white dude in a hood that grew up around all brothers who go around saying the N-word like he had melanin galore. This is called a ghetto pass, or you're invited to the cookout. They have many different names. I remember the first time I was with my dude. I don't want to say his name, but he had a white boy he was cool with. And I remember it was the first time ever I heard a white dude just casually be like, hey man, my nigga. I was just like, first time I heard this, oh, what's up, my nigga? I was like, it was a culture shock. I've never seen it before. But my dude, I'm telling you, he is thorough. And when I say thorough, I ain't no dry snitch, but he's thorough that way. You feel me? Where he's accredited. He can walk anywhere in the neighborhood. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. But he's thorough in that type of way. You feel me? Fast forward, I worked at a spot where a white dude came in. He started working at this particular spot. And the first thing he came to me, he was like, hey, what's up, my nigga? He just said that like that. And I was like, hey, yo, bro, I don't know you like that. It ain't that kind of party, man. You know what I mean? Like, I don't get down like that. I don't know who you talking to. I ain't your end. You feel me? Because that was my code at the time. I was younger. I didn't deal with that or whatever. But if he was melanated, would I ever thought that? No. That is racial biasness. we're automatically biased towards whatever race that we're a part of. If you're rich, you have rich bias. If you're poor, you have poor bias. If you're a Christian, you have Christian biasness. Bias towards whatever party you're dealing with. All right. So that's the second time. And the third kind is racial insensitivity. In my opinion, this is what Joe Rogan falls under. Being racially insensitive is you saying things that may be perceived a certain way about a culture that you're not a part of. So when you say things like, so when you're in a group of melanated people and you're listening to Jay-Z or any kind of rap artist, which is in every song, and the white person is repeatedly saying the word, depending on who they with, they could be seen as, hey, you're being racially insensitive. What John Gruden said with the Las Vegas Raiders, that was racially insensitive. From what I can tell, and I didn't evaluate or investigate, I just watched the little Joe Rogan apology and watched a clip where they showed him saying the word, the N word. For one thing, it was over a span of 13 years or something like that. For another thing, they only said what he said, they didn't put it in context. And for third, it sounds like he was just repeating things that he heard. What do I mean by that? If he's talking about Richard Pryor, peace and blessings be upon him, something Richard Pryor say, and instead of saying an N-word, he just says the word, that's just him saying the word. And I'm telling you, if a person is truly racist, they're going to try to hide it. You feel what I'm saying? I've had more what I feel like racial experience in my life, and a person never said a word. Never. But they let me know how they feel by their actions. From what I can tell, Joe Rogan has had melanated people in his podcast, looks very comfortable talking to melanated people. And it's not one of those things like, oh, yeah, I've had a black person at my house, so I'm not racist. It's not that. If you're melanated, you can kind of tell who don't like you. And there's nothing you can do about it. I've been around Europeans where they kind of looking at me like, I can tell that, you know what I'm saying? Like they don't really mesh with me like that for real, for real. You know what I mean? Joe Rogan, to me, with my third eye, he don't look like that. He like one of them white dudes that really probably didn't grow up in a hood like that, but he don't look like he's like, oh, you know what? I'm going to make it my plight to make sure all black people stay in their place and I'm going to hold them down. He don't strike me like that. He says some things that could be taken as racially insensitive, where instead of saying the word, he might have should have said the N word. You know what I'm talking about? So, in my opinion, that is racially insensitive. It could be the same as saying, if you're quote unquote fat shaming somebody. If you see a person like, hey, yo, you're fat, that's just insensitive. Or you're poor, that's insensitive. It doesn't mean that you're against all poor people. You're just making a statement. So let me put it like this. If it was a case that white people in particular shouldn't say a word, then we as melanated people need to stop moving the goalposts. And what I mean by that is, I watched The Hateful Eight, the movie The Hateful Eight. Quentin Tarantino makes it his business to make sure that he puts the N-word in every one of his movies. You feel me? But me being a person where I'm not triggered because I view myself as a true spiritualist, meaning that I don't identify with race, creed, gender, sexism, or none of that crap. I'm a god. That is energy. Just like the deities you have on your altar, you think they look like that? You think they have an arm and leg and they got a smile? You really think that? Then you need to go back to Christianity where they paint your savior in a certain way and make God look like a man, where you say amen or hymns showing you the gender. You know, if y'all can hear what I'm saying, y'all can hear what I'm saying. If you can't, you just don't get it. But if you feel that way, that a God or energy has a distinguishable figure that looks like a man, then you're far away from spirituality, in my opinion. Spirituality means energy. It goes beyond the physical. So my spirituality goes beyond this physical. The reason why you can be spiritual and ascend to enlightenment is because you go beyond the restraints of physicality. You're not bound to the human body. You're an etheric energy being. You feel me? So when I see Joe Rogan do that or say that or whatever, you have to take that same energy with Quentin Tarantino in all these movies. Like I said, a Hateful Eight, man, I don't know how many times he said in this, in that, in this. Also the Django. You feel me? Like, you remember Cass was out of their hookup over Django. But guess what? Django was a hero. He also showed Django saying, oh man, get to kill white boys. You know what I'm saying? He rescued his black woman, his black queen. You feel me? So Django also was empowering in a sense. You feel me? Like, that's the thing about Quentin Tarantino. He's paradoxical. I'm not saying it was right or wrong. I'm just making a point. If you have that same thing with that word period, then get mad when somebody that looks like you says that word. We're either going to ban the word and not use it, or we're going to stop being triggered when you let these people use it and you think they have so much power over you. If you, like, for real, if you have melanin, you got a pineal. If you're considered dominant, which any biologist would tell you, melanin is dominant. If you're a dominant being, then why are you letting people that you consider beneath you or recessive have so much power over you? Look at somebody that's filthy rich, like a billionaire. There's no impoverished person that can make them feel less than rich. The reason why you're triggered by a European saying a certain thing about you is because you haven't embraced your full godhood. You don't feel that you're really superior. You don't feel that you're really dominant. You don't feel like you're a god. Therefore, you allow people to bring you off and pull you down and make you feel a certain way. There is no white person in this world that can come to me and say anything to make me feel any less than who the hell I am. You feel me? And I'll do you one better. Nobody melanated can either, because I don't care. Once you know who you are, nobody can tell you what you're not. You're allowing people to define who you are, and you're buying into their system. So once again, there's a difference between racism, racial biases, and racial insensitivity. In my opinion, Joe Rogan falls under racial insensitive. Am I pissed by that? No. Do I really care about him saying it? No. Do I care if he said it in a negative context? No. Doesn't do anything for me. What you can do is use your power called intention and dollars. When you feel like someone isn't doing you right, don't shop with them. You said that we need to empower each other. Go out of your way to buy black. Go find melanated people and break bread. Go live in an environment where there's all melanated people. Build your Black Wall Street. It already exists. There's already places that where you go, there's going to be people that are melanated doing well. Go to those spots instead of sitting and wanting to see that the table wasn't meant for you. You can read between the lines and take that however you want to. But it is what it is. This is a racially mixed place. You can say that segregation should have stayed the way it was. You can say that we should have never integrated. But to say that's living in the past. It is what it is. And from what I can tell, races are mixed like a mud. You can't tell who's white. You can't tell who's black. You can't tell who's biracial. Fast forward 100 years from now, you're really not going to tell. So the universe is getting rid of racism because y'all won't deal with it on a personal level. You feel me? To me, this is common sense, but I feel like I still should have made this video or whatever. So that's my 11 cents on that, yo. That's my 11 cents. Once again, it's not that deep. So I appreciate y'all hearing me rant. This video mad long too, 45 minutes, and I basically feel like a rant, but it is what it is, y'all. So until next time, yo, peace.